welcome to How to Win the Lottery Eco Module, The Glacier by Jeff Wood. I'm Joey Lewandowski.
And it's a Joey podcast today, a Joey heavy podcast. Joey does the heavy lifting.
Are you also Joey? I don't know. What's going on here?
No, you're Joey.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome.
I'm an abstract representation of matter, nameless, faceless, just a voice floating on the solar winds, baby.
Does that impact the way you read?
That's a good question. Good question. I like it. Yeah, it's,
Oh, I thought you were not going to answer the question.
No, I have a universal view of things. My cosmic brain is sort of unconcerned with human matters. And so, petty drama is meaningless to me. And so I'm more interested in form.
Ooh.
As opposed to void, which is what God stuck me with on the first day.
You've been around since the first day. I thought I was just light on the first day. Man. Well, I guess you are light. You're made of, wow. Does this go back to every once in a while I think about the Elif Batuman aesthetic life versus what's the alternative?
I don't remember. Shit.
But I wonder if this is that.
Yeah.
I can look it up. I can't Google it.
Do you mean what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Well, if you as a corporeal form, you're saying that you're
all this material, form. Guys. Psych. I have a body. Psych.
Well, here we are talking about The Glacier. This is our second in a row $2 radio, third for the pod.
Yeah. Honestly,
I think, in my opinion, $2 radio now 2 for 3. It rebounded after last week. Let's say that.
Yeah, $2 radio is a. It's interesting when you read a bunch of a single. Man, I thought of a joke that was really it was kind of mean, and then
was it about me? Was it?
Well, I was gonna say, because I was saying psych, and then I was gonna say, and then I was gonna lead you down this path where I kept calling you handsome, and then I was gonna say, "Welcome to the psych ward, motherfucker," like psych.
Oh no!
And then. And then I didn't do it because we started getting to business.
Honestly, it might be meaner.
Yeah. That I brought it up.
That you did it without any kind of fun or compliments along the way.
I thought it all through in my head and was just like, yeah,
rude.
Yeah, I'm always being mean in my brain to people. So $2 radio is I think. Once you start reading a lot from a single press, especially an independent press, which has aesthetic vision, because I think generally, I don't know the guys from $2 or the people from $2 radio, it might be like a bigger team, or it might be an individual, or it might be a handful of people, but you start getting a specific aesthetic vision, because the smaller you have, the more singular that vision can be. Obviously, that's what fucking singular means.
Yeah.
Right? So over these 3 books that we've read by them, which is the David Connerly Nam,
Ancient Oceans in Central Kentucky,
Mark De Silva,
Square Wave,
and now Jeff Wood,
Glacier.
What you have is these books that are nebulous in plot, and sort of stretched using form and language.
Yep.
I guess in some ways the De Silva book is not so much that, because it's not the language is not as ethereal. It's much more dense, but it
this feels more in line with Ancient Oceans, but also all 3 are of a type.
Yeah. So you really get the sense of what this team is looking at in books, which is, I think they like to be perplexed in a way, and have.
Well, it feels like they encourage challenging literature.
Yeah, and have that perplexion serve an emotional need, as opposed to something that hits a bunch of story beats and satisfies you on a classical level. They're trying to manipulate your, not our lack of ability, but our maybe limits of perception with regards to plot and things like that.
How long have they been around? Do you remember when you first heard of them?
Don't know.
How'd you first hear about them?
I don't know. There was a time a handful of years ago when I started really looking into independent presses, and that's how you end up on the internet learning about Lazy Fascist and New York Tyrant and Melville House and things like that. It probably just was born during like my second era of the internet, whereas like the first era of the internet was me using AIM and trying to have cyber sex with people. And then the second era of the internet is like, this thing is actually like a powerful machine for knowledge.
Instead of reading about people having cyber sex in books.
Yeah. So that's probably how. I don't know when that would have been. Maybe 2010 or 9 or something like that.
How many other of their books have you read? Do you know? Like a bunch, a handful, a couple?
I don't know off the top of my head,
but a lot, or more than a few.
Yeah, more than a few.
Okay,
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
If you had to describe what the Glacier is about,
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's okay. So there is an apocalypse level event that is put on pause.
It like undoes itself.
At which point our main character, Jonah, does what? What happens with this? Because he's the one that pauses it. He stops it and
So I don't know. So we were talking about before we started recording that this entire season is eco module. And so reading this, assuming that to be the case, what this is about, I think it informs, like I have an understanding, not what it's about, but kind of what the message is.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely stuff in there that I felt really kind of hit close to home, because I when I was a kid, I moved to a very woodsy suburb. Over the course of my living in this place, off and on for the last 30 years, it's been diminished by the exact sort of like vinyl siding condominium stuff, like woods being slowly stripped away, the personality of the town being torn up literally at the roots, right? Like in a very like literal, like they pulled the trees out of the ground to put these cookie cutter McMansions and if not McMansions, sort of mid-range priced condos that are not only, they're not even aesthetically neutral. They're like an aesthetic suck. They pull all of the beauty away from the world. Whereas like nature, like by its existence, is inevitably beautiful. There is, this is something that we've talked about a bunch of times. So like some of what this book was about to me when I was reading it, and obviously you bring a lot of yourself to the table, is the idea of aesthetic death as nature dies and sort of the numbing that comes with that. But again, this book exists very like much out of reach for me, and as far as determining plot and things like that.
I think that's part of it. I think that's for sure.
Yeah.
Like I picked up on that, at least to a certain extent. I also think, so there's something where the characters are talking to one another about how there's like no one around. There's all these houses, but there's no people there. How are there ever going to be people to fill all these houses?
Yeah.
And it's described in a way that like either means no one lives there yet, but they're going to feel like, because it's still under construction, or like people are gone. Like it's unclear to me one way or the other. So while this is happening, there's also like sort of supernatural things occurring. And not that, undoing the apocalypse is not supernatural, but like there's these like several characters see
Mudman,
doppelgangers kind of of themselves.
Man. Yeah.
Again, this is all just like me trying to like parse what this is about. I saw that like that's an ancestor version of themselves.
Sure.
Disappointed in what their future generations have allowed the world to become.
Because also the apocalyptic event sort of undoes time, and you end up with you have like character speeches that are about maybe in like the opposite of the overstory, about how like nothing actually connects, and how you have these individual moments and everything exists individually without any like broader system of roots among them, that we have all of these pieces that have been, I don't know if they were irreparably damaged or not put together, but they exist individually in time.
Well, there's a lot of characters who basically sort of, and I think this is like what you're talking about, like speak in almost like math equations, or like if this, then that, and if this, that means that no time has ever moved, or like everything's happening at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Never to like a point or an end, but just kind of saying either what you're saying that like nothing connects or everything connects because everything is exactly one or something. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a universality. It's weird because this is weird. We were actually having this conversation when we went down to Philadelphia. We were having a conversation with Matt and Lisa, or I think just Lisa was partaking in the conversation about the Xeno Zyro making time sort of this stretched out thing where no individual moment can touch itself, and so everything exists all at the same time, and we're just experiencing it linearly because that's all that we can handle in like our current corporeal form, which is like very much stoned logic, and which is fine. I don't really have a problem with stoned logic, but it's like it is the sort of thing that even though I think like it makes sense to me when I think it out, it is the sort of thing that like if I start talking about it, people will sort of roll their eyes at
Well,
me.
I think it's the kind of thing that you can receive in one of two different ways. Either it is the most reassuring thing or a thing that will paralyze you with the reality of what things could be, right?
Or a thing that just people when they hear it go like, "Oh, I don't give a fuck about that." Like there's a whole bunch of people out there, of which I am one of them sometimes, that like if you ask them if they believe in God or whatever, they'll just be like, I don't know, and I literally never think about it. It's just not part of my it's not part of my makeup to think of the universe this way, because they're like thinking of it in a material sense, which is certainly a legitimate way to live, certainly one that probably has a more positive effect on the world.
Yeah. There is also a character in this book named Samson who drives an ice cream truck, who's also kind of like a death dealer, like an assisted suicide guy, kind of. Don't know exactly what that's about. There's also like mass suicide at the end and then like a mass revival at the end. Don't really know what that's about.
Yeah, it gets stranger as the book goes on. Because as it starts, you have these characters and they're like surveyors, right? Are they surveyors for the government or
they're just surveying things. There's like two people like shooting and one person measuring, and unclear what they're doing.
I don't know what those people are doing when I see them in the world. Like with the like tripod and the thing, it's like measuring a distance, and then they're like marking a tree or something. And I never know what those people.
Like
are
I thought in the beginning, I mean, they might just be like marking land to build more developments.
Yeah,
but it seems like even they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Or they're so bored by it that they just don't talk about it.
Yeah, and there's a boy named Sue, Johnny Cash style, in there.
Yeah, I was like, Sue, what?
Yeah,
Ooh.
and there's like the most emotionally affecting part of the book for me that I like felt anxiety over was when they're in the car. The one guy is just giving Jonah shit. He's just like, why are you always writing in that notebook?
Yeah.
What are you writing? You're writing poetry? Why don't you read some poetry for us? Why don't you read some poetry right now? And then he reads it, and it's like some wordy, affected, like the stars are shining in the sky and that stuff. And the guy's just like, get the fuck out of my car. And then they have to get out, and he's just like sitting in the car, just like. And then I think that might be the first appearance of the Mudman.
I think it's also hard to remember what happens because it feels like, to what we were talking about before, it all kind of happens at the same time.
Yeah, also,
like there's not really like a timeline, I don't think, in this book.
No, yeah, there's not. After the like apocalypse thing gets undone, I think everything like it goes into a casing, and then that casing gets shaken up, and then so it's like everything like the cause and effect seem to be out of order or inconsequential or something like that, but in a very like
not like Tarantino.
No, and like it's interesting to think of it as a film because it's like a cinematic novel, quote unquote.
Well, I think it's written kind of like in screenplay style.
It's written sort of similarly to a screenplay, and I think one of the reasons why there is this distance and it makes it more difficult is because it's written in a screenplay style. You have dialogue written like that, and you have stage directions. They're not really written like stage directions. They're kind of novelistic, but it is.
Well, at one point it says illuminating the audience, us. Like it's like we are a part of the story.
Yeah, and it is very action oriented. It like clues you into images that you should be seeing and thinking about, and it tells you what people are doing, and it's in present tense, which is not entirely unique, but also like not entirely common either. Like present tense novels are strange. They're weird. They're weird to read for a certain reason, because like I think there's a greater tension in them because You are moving with the characters in the same way that there's tension in movies when you're like, there aren't past tense movies, or I guess there are when there are flashbacks and things like that. But essentially, movies are all told in the present tense. Screenplays are written in present tense, and so this is written in present tense. It's actions. You get the dialogue, but there's no interior world for these characters.
Right.
And so the audience has to collaborate with the novel on that interior world, and you create it, but it's also opaque. Like, you're bringing to the table what that interior world is, but the novel, I don't think it, and I think this is an intentional aesthetic effect. The novel is not giving you enough to know what to think. And so that creates a very confused perception of what's going on emotionally. And because there's already a confused perception about what's going on with the plot, because of the lack of linearity, it gives you I don't want to say demented, but like it gives you like a
warped.
Yeah, like a
skewed,
a perspective on it that it never feels quite like you're looking at the world.
Well, I think there's a part here. There's a line at the end where it's houses destroy and rebuild themselves in a repeating cycle of self-annihilation and regeneration. The neighborhood crumbles and reconstructs in a looping circuit of collapse and assembly over and over and over again. Goes on from there.
Well, I mean, not to sorry to interrupt, but that reminds me of Ghost Story.
Well, that was exactly what I was about to say. Where it's like it feels like there are characters who exist in a place but outside of time, and just see the entire thing like loop back through. Yeah.
So not to ruin it for anybody, but Ghost Story is a David Lowery movie. It's a fantastic movie, one of the best movies of the last 20-something years. And it just is about a character who has died and he's haunting his house, and you go through his haunting of that house through all of time.
Until time resets, basically.
Until like it loops, and he's just there for forever until like this endless cycle of the universe returns him. Where presumably he'll go through it again and again and again.
Right.
And so,
the same thought. Yeah.
It reminded me like exactly of the David Lowery
which it
movie.
felt like, because so I don't know if you saw the back, if you know anything about Jeff Wood, because I didn't know him before.
I know he makes films. He makes experimental films.
Well,
right?
yeah, the bio on the back cover mentions he co-founded an experimental film art group, so it's clear that he's like got a cinematic visual vision. Not that like other authors are not, but it feels like he thinks about things maybe as film. And I think the final third of this book is like one long chapter where it's like, I was just picturing kind of Party Down, but like by David Lynch, sort of in a way, right? Or like,
well, I thought also like as far as nods to other cinematic things, like the stuff with the Mudman, like especially that scene when he kicks them out of the car and then he looks over and he sees the Mudman. I was like, oh, that's like so John Carpenter. That's so Halloween, like that startling moment where it's just like, oh, like look at that scary image that's there, and we don't know why that thing is there, but it's frightening us because it's like.
And we're going to have to reckon with it at some point.
And we have to, in our minds, make up what Mudman is, right? We all have in our heads this idea of what radioactive man looks like, and this is why I brought that up in that text message the other day about Marty McFly wearing the radioactive suit and confronting Crispin Glover in the middle of the night, because like that's what radioactive man looks like, right?
Yeah.
He's wearing the suit that you expect, and so these are images that are familiar with us, but decontextualized or put in a different like if you see a guy wearing a radioactive suit walking down the street, it's as opposed to seeing a guy in a radioactive suit on a documentary about nuclear fission,
right?
Like. It changes everything, and it becomes a horror story for your entire block that this guy is in a radioactive suit, right?
Yeah, you would think that like threats is happening outside.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
You're like, no, why? What don't I know? What does he know that I don't know?
And then similarly, Mudman sort of like it is a counterbalance to the radioactive man, because it is also a radioactive man, Simpsons too, but The Mudman is a counterbalance to that because it is almost primordial. It's like this idea of like man emerging from the muck and like entering the world. So you have this like, again, the dislocation of time and these artifacts from different eras that establish a kind of tone or mood, but like again, like beyond tone and mood, I have a very hard time putting the pieces together to discover what meaning there is.
Well, I think like what I really liked and really appreciated, but also does not help answer questions, is like that final third of the book, which is almost like it's featuring characters that we have met before.
Yeah.
and frames context for like brief interactions we've read before, but is also like seemingly a completely new and different thing.
Yeah.
And feels like I mentioned David Lynch, but also feels like Ruben Östlund, the guy who did like Triangle of Sadness and like The Square, like it feels kind of like that, but like feels like a bunch of different things where like there are rules to this world that we don't understand.
Yeah.
And it's weird. And there's this organization called Event Horizon, which he says this guy, Mr. Stevens, who might be the snake from the Garden of Eden, or might just call himself
like, that. He presents as an antagonist.
He's like the root of all evil, whatever. This is what we do here at the Event Horizon. We engineer moments, perfect moments for imperfect people. And it's like, I don't know what that means. Like, it sounds cool, but I don't know what that means. And they create this like dinner party they call the Last Supper, but it's talked about in a way that people can go to more than one of these. Because like, oh, is this your first Last Supper? They all take this shot of like orange Kool-Aid, whatever, die, come back. Very strange. I love it. It's weird. I don't understand it, but it's cool. And I don't know what that to like. If reading this book for the eco module with that in mind, I don't know what to make of this. Maybe if I wasn't thinking about nature, environment, eco for the first like 2/3, this might. I don't know.
Yeah, what do you make of the title?
So when you give the list of books for the season, just like, oh, this is gonna be about like rising oceans or whatever, and it's just like, nope. Do you know?
I don't.
Like, what are like? There's like tip of the iceberg, but that's different. Like Titanic crash into an iceberg on a glacier. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think of things moving glacially as moving incredibly slowly.
Sure. So is like life the glacier?
I don't know.
Is existence the glacier?
Yeah, I'm gonna feel like a real fucking idiot if there's like a real concrete answer that I just like blew past.
Well, so we talk a lot about rereading.
Yeah,
and I don't know that I think of course this would like reward rereading. I don't know that there are more answers in this. Like I don't think knowing where, which I don't mind.
Yeah,
and I kind of like.
Yeah,
because I think there is a logic to this. Like I think Jeff Wood understands this world and what he's talking about, even if it's dense or hard.
Well, it's also, it's an imagistic logic, like in a very like tone poem-y kind of way. You're getting an idea, and the images make you react through jump scares, or like there's an emotional reaction to someone putting a shotgun in their mouth, right?
Yeah.
And then is it Mr. Stevens like shoots himself but he's fine.
Because the apocalypse undoes itself.
Yeah.
Well, because there's a very scary thing in the beginning where like everyone's like something is really wrong.
Yeah.
And then the apocalypse happens and then everything, rewinds. But it's just like, that's terrifying. That's how like this starts basically. It's wild.
Yeah. Would you make it into a movie?
Yeah, I think you would have to do like another person who I think although he'll never make another movie, like a Shane Carruth, like an Upstream Color, where it's like there's logic here and I kind of understand parts of it, but like it's more about how it makes you feel and how it looks.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure.
And yeah, it's laid out pretty easily.
How many characters are there? There's like the 3 surveyors. There's Mr. Stevens. There's Simone, I think, is one who talks to.
Yeah.
But there's not that many more main people, are there?
But it's still like a big budget thing because you have these moments of apocalypse and things like that.
Yeah. I don't know. I really liked it. I also think it's like, even though it's 2, and we just talked about $2 Radio.
Yeah.
$2 of those books back to back, like they almost, even though they are about similar things or written in similar, like appreciate similar ideas, they almost could not be more different.
Oh no, they're very, very different.
And this is not like, I don't want to say like palate cleanser, but it was like a nice.
No, it works
because it's not difficult to read.
I think it's the difference between almost reading like a dense book of nonfiction and a really solid collection of poetry. Like your brain is using 2 completely different muscles for those things. And if you read the really dense book of nonfiction and you don't really enjoy it, that's like a bit like a hard day of work that you're not getting paid for.
Right.
And then poetry, you don't even need to understand poetry to like,
if it just makes you feel a certain way.
Yeah. Or you get caught up in the language being used and it's like, wow, that really like that worked for me in a way. And it can go the other way too, by the way. Like if you read poetry and like I've read some poetry is unbelievably unpleasant and whatever. I don't need to defend the merits of poetry, but like I think it can function in that way as a counter to Mark De Silva.
Well, if you want to write in about any $2 radio book, even books that we have not covered, you can email us.
Recommend some $2 radio books to us.
I want to. I was also thinking today, I've mentioned this before, I want you to craft the module, even though we have like 3 or 4 modules that are like basically planned out that we have not done yet. I want to reread Antkind.
Okay.
Which, good luck. I mean, we could do another adaptable, unadaptable thing because that feels, but also we could just do literally anything else that fits into. Because when we watched The Fall today, it's like early, like 100 years ago, and he describes movies as either moving pictures or flickies, and I was just like, oh, Flicker, Antkind.
If we did Antkind, we'd probably do Flicker in the same module, right? I know you don't. You weren't crazy about Flicker.
I think I would maybe appreciate rereading it. Also, talking about it would be good, but like that's a difficult book.
Yeah, my friend Charlie just read Bug, which is another Theodore Roszak book, and he had a positive review of it, and I love that book.
Bug?
Yeah.
Cool.
So.
All right. Well, if you want to email in lottery@cageclub.me, we'll read on the next episode that we record when we get it. We got 4 different things to read. First one, on our Adam Levine episode interview.
We got 4 things to read?
Let's keep it in check here. On the Adam Levine interview on our YouTube video, the Lost Scrapbook says, first.
Oh, the Lost Scrapbook is an Evan Dara book. So that whoever that person is an Evan Dara fan. So I'm hoping that they come back around to the Vermont episode.
All right. Cool.
But they were commenting first, like they were the first person to comment on the thing.
Video's been up for months.
God bless them. Tell them, respond to them saying, hey, we have an Evan Dara episode coming up. So be sure to listen in.
Okay.
Or not, because anytime that a fan of something particular listens in, sometimes they're dicks to us because we don't say exactly what they want us to say about their books.
Well, you know what? Bless them.
Bless them. Yeah, we're above it here at the How to Win the Lottery pod.
We also got a guest pitch for New Millennium Boys author Alex Kazemi. Did you see this email?
No. I know New Millennium Boys though. I know that book.
I hope you are so well and congrats on the podcast success, says this automated thing. Alex Kazemi is a Canadian debut novelist who's been praised by American Psycho author Bret Easton Ellis. The book has been featured in places like Vanity Fair, and he recently had a nationwide conversation on CBC in Canada about the crisis of boyhood and was on the Bret Easton Ellis podcast. Yeah. Kazemi was also featured on Dennis Cooper's Best Books of 2023. The book has a growing cult audience, blah, blah, blah. I'd love for Alex to talk about his new book, New Millennium Boys, in context of the current conservative book bans and the issues young men grew up with in the 2000s due to the MTV monoculture. Conservatives at his publisher try to censor certain themes in the book, resulting in a demand of content trigger warning for readers.
Well, yeah, all right.
Best, Kristen Fernandino.
Should be
publicist, Permuted Press. We're not going to talk to this guy.
I don't know. We could, right? But also, like, I am anyone that is like comes in hard on the like. Fuck trigger warnings.
Yeah.
Like those guys, like, I feel like what they're not really saying is fuck trigger warnings. I feel like they're saying a bunch of other stuff first.
Okay. If you're out there listening to this and you have an author to pitch, understand that our modules are themed. Like, I know that you, because they're just like hitting up every book podcast and be like, we need a press out there. But if they were like, we know that you're covering a lot of environmental books, here's a book about environment, be like, yeah, okay. About trigger warning the environment. Yeah, but our girl Katie Rundy did that with us. She hit us up with we had a connection to her, but she was like, your internet module, like let's like we love Rundy. It fit in. Yeah, Rundy's the best. I don't know, but like I have it's interesting because he said conservative a bunch of times in there too. And it's like that seems like an appeal to like a liberal-ish mind, while in my head also maybe promoting conservative ideology with the idea of like trigger warnings. I'll say this about trigger warnings. In teaching college for 10 years, I applied trigger warnings pretty regularly, and not only did they not harm anything, but they prepared certain students who would have otherwise had a hard time to be able to take part in conversations that maybe they would have had negative reactions for. Like, they were able to prepare themselves for the material beforehand. I had a student, I was teaching Wolf and White Fan,
And I had a student whose father had
Oh, I remember you saying this. Yeah.
had died by a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and I called him because he somehow, like, this came up in a thing during class. He was like, look, this is my circumstance. And he didn't,
unrelated to Wolf.
yeah, he didn't know this book. So I called him and I said, look, this book is about a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And if that's going to be a problem for you, we can figure something else out. I'm happy to read a separate book with you, and you still have to do the work and you still have to blah, blah, blah. He was very thankful for me letting him know.
Sure.
And he read the fucking book and he did the work, and he had valuable things to think about and say. And it was worthwhile. So, like, when I think of trigger warnings in an academic context, I think of them as being valuable to a class and valuable to building trust between teacher and student, and not I mean, you might lose some of the shock value of the literature itself, which I think can be valuable in some circumstances, but you don't want kids running out of the room. Now, the other thing that he's talking about is content, like sensitivity readers, which are people that I think are employed by major presses that read things to make sure that you're not being racist or homophobic or anything like that. And I can see.
Can you imagine having that job? That seems tough.
I mean, I can see where that job in current climate could lend itself towards censorship in a way that is, bullshit. There's a lot of great books that have been called sexist and racist and fatphobic and all these things when they're nothing of the sort.
Well, that also reminds me of, we had to remove this post, right? Which is like, you're reading things, or your job is to like find stuff that does not meet whatever ethical standards and blah, blah, blah. And like, you're just like, oof.
Yeah. So I'm not wild about that, but here's one other reason to read that book and talk to, not necessarily even talk to that author, but do me a quick thing and look up the cover of that book, because I think it would be fun to look at that with Matt. Right?
Like, it looks like it's from 2000.
Yeah. And like New Millennium Boys, like boys is spelled with a Z, right? Yeah.
And it's like kind of like 60. It's like 2000s flashing back on the 60s, where it's like Scooby-Doo, like blue and black waves with like a sticker with like a very 2000s, like on a CD font, New Millennium Boys.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I've thought about reading that book because I've seen it in the store, and I've I'm a fan of Bret Easton Ellis.
Bret Easton Ellis says, my favorite millennial provocateur. That's on the cover of this thing. Oh, also it's like a sticker, and it's like holographic, metallic, like.
Yeah.
The Harvard, I just looked at the images, but Harvard Crimson's review is a study in shock value.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I again, like, obviously, like, we loved and had him on and loved him talking to B.R. Yeager. And I think that B.R. Yeager is probably, I'm guessing, doing more extreme things than this guy is doing in his book. So it's not like the content isn't something that right. I'm opposed to. But the presentation of opening up with like, you can't say anything anymore is like, just makes me wince.
It somehow like appeals to both sides, like you're saying, and
yeah.
Also,
oh, these conservatives are trying to shut us down because we're not sensitive enough, and like, it's like I don't think that that's what's happening. I disagree with your characterization of what's happening. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it might be worthwhile talking to that person, but we'll talk it out off mic.
We got an email from Jason saying,
Jason,
is the Patreon real? This is a funny email. Hello, I tracked down the link to your Patreon on the website. There doesn't seem to be a way to sign up. Have been a Patreon member to things before, so I'm hoping I'm not just being dumb, but that's possible. I could also see the Patreon's existence being a bit, which would be very funny.
Does he think that it's a bit because like all the jokes are still there and the stuff about me doing people's homework for them and showing up at their house, and like, could he find that page and read it, or does he think that it's a bit because because
I think us plugging a thing that isn't, I don't know. Yeah. I have any number of reasons.
Either way.
No, that site is like closed. Like, you can't see.
Oh,
well, actually, this member isn't. No. He found out. So this was confusing. On Patreon, every account you can create and you can support. And so it found us as like a creator, but doesn't have a content, but it also says we're not supporting anybody because like we're not like.
Yeah.
So like there's a page for our stuff, but there's nothing there. It just says we're not doing anything.
Yeah.
So like it existed. He's like, well, it existed.
Yeah. Okay.
Found the podcast while searching for live blog things. It is great. Almost caught up. Hence the email, Jason. Well, thank you, Jason.
A Megan Boyle fan.
I've been reading
we
Live
love
Log
Megan Boyle.
2023.
Yeah, in which
Good.
the boys got a shout out.
It's very exciting to see that.
Yeah, we love Megan. She's the best.
What'd you call us? Like Two Sweet Podcast Boys or something?
We're going to change the name of the podcast to that.
Two Sweet Podcast Boys. I thought about
We could use it as a blurb.
in our press kit, I have things that people have said about us. I think Bud has something. We also have Darcy, and I have a thing from Megan Boyle, which is her quoting you talking about like Jesus Christ, don't do that. So I don't have like a second Megan Boyle quote, but I also could do that.
Oh, Two Sweet Podcast Boys coming at you.
Then we have an email about this book from Egg, Meg's reaction to The Glacier.
I have not talked with Meg about this book at all. I have no idea what her opinion or response to it's going to be.
Do you think she liked it or do you think she didn't like
I think
it?
she probably liked it.
This book was pretty good.
Okay.
But
Tempered.
I wish it was longer so it could luxuriate in the weirdness
All right.
a little bit more.
Yeah.
I don't really have a lot to say about this book. I wish I had more time to read this. I ended up speeding through most of it so that I wouldn't have 2 books in a row I skipped. Well, you know.
She didn't really skip the last one. She DNF'd it, which is a little different. Yeah, well, Meg, I think, is in the same bad reading habit that we are, where we spend a lot of the week doing life and work, and then the podcast comes up on the weekend, and we're just like, holy fuck, I have 300 pages to read in 6 hours, which is not an ideal way to read a book.
No.
Although this book I didn't do that with. I took my time with this book.
What's fucked up
Yeah.
is that this is like the easiest book in a while that you could have done in
I
like
know.
one sitting.
Yeah.
And this is like the first book in a while that I'm like,
You
I'll do
finish early.
30 pages a day.
Yeah.
Like what we're supposed to do. Fucking idiot.
Yeah. All you need to do is 30 pages a day for anything, and you'll be fine.
We have it mapped out so that each season is basically across its average 30 pages a day for 20 weeks, 10 books or whatever, right? Like it's doable. I felt like the fact that this book was formatted like a movie script, it worked for me because it was like I was seeing and hearing the scene where Jonah was talking and the note under his dialogue said barely audible. To me, that type of thing, assuming that the author wants the viewer or reader to know what he's actually saying, makes it more effective than a movie. Because if this was a movie instead, the average viewer probably couldn't catch much of what he's saying. That's fair. You're like kind of in his head in that way.
Yeah.
Although I also feel like sometimes when you watch things with like subtitles, like you can hear, like I watched a movie recently with subtitles where like it's subtitling like the TV in the other room, and I'm like, I don't know if you're supposed to like
I don't
understand what's going on.
I don't subtitle stuff except for foreign language films.
Sometimes this is actually me being dumb. Sometimes I subtitle like British movies. I'm like can't understand the accent.
Well, I remember a lot of people would subtitle. I guess like the more like I don't know, is it like the Limey or something?
Oh,
That people would
okay.
Like the more working class you get, the
like Snatch,
the pikey stuff in Snatch, sure, or even something like Trainspotting, which is like I don't think you need subtitles for it, but I know some people who have difficulty understanding.
I also liked Egg writes that the children in this book seem to symbolize nature, just their wildness and the fact that they are seemingly the only things left after the event horizon. All in all, a nice little palate cleanser.
She called it a palate cleanser too.
She did.
Yeah.
Well, me and the Egg, same page.
Yeah.
I like the book though. The book is good.
I like the book a lot, and in a way that this type of thing aesthetically can be hit or miss for me, and so this did it.
This type of thing meaning like screenplay or meaning like ethereal sort of poetry kind of
Ethereal sort of poetry. I think one more thing that I want to say about the screenplay structure, and maybe just the structure in general, is there's a lot of white space on the page.
Yep.
And that's like doing a lot because there is a full body experience to seeing a dense block of text on a page unbroken. And then
Ducks Newburyport.
Yeah, and there's a completely different bodily experience to seeing 15 words on a page. And neither of those are better or worse experiences. I mean, they're better or worse experiences depending on the book. Some books, that block on a page, you're like, this is fucking awesome. And then some books, when there's 10 things on the page, it's like, this person is phoning it in. But like, it definitely creates an experience seeing like the layout of a page. And when that's done with aesthetic intent, as it clearly is here, then that feels good to me. I feel positive.
Well, I think that like what you're saying, I think with intentionality, anything can be good or bad, or anything can be good. If you're just doing it because, like your point, like lazy. It's just like,
Yeah.
well, write a book
For sure. Yeah.
and keep reading.
Well, fuck. Son of a goddamn fuck.
I thought you were going to say one more thing about this book is Today's Crime Is. So, like, you have the opportunity to subvert my expectations.
Yeah, today's crime is stealing people's post.
I've been stuffed in your pocket for the last 100 days. When I don't get my bath, I take it out on the sleighs. So grease up your baby for the ball on the hill. I'll polish them rockets now and swallow those pills and say, oh. Space law